Austin Simmons may have landed the best wide receiver group in Ole Miss history, and it might not be done.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran, a member of the national media with Yahoo Sports, and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're diving into the early signing day and the electric wide receiver room that Ole Miss just brought in. With Caleb Cunningham, Dillon, Alfred, Winnie Watkins, and Samari Lee, this unit has the potential to elevate Ole Miss's already storied wide receiver legacy to new heights. And let's not forget, it was Austin Simmons' clutch game-changing drive against the Georgia Bulldogs that kind of helped make this recruiting class possible. Stick around as we break it all down on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network, Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, or Chris Marler at Locked On Gamecocks, because they're really cool to talk to right now. They offer great perspectives on college football, the SEC, and even Ole Miss, so check them out. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Ole Miss had a very good early signing day. And as I record this, just so everybody knows, it is shortly after Tyler Lockhart has signed with Ole Miss. So Ray Guillory, I do not know yet. That'll handle with last night's live stream. I knew that by the time that aired. And the other players like Connor Hollis is going to take a little bit of time. Ole Miss is looking good on all the fronts from where I sit and think about it, but I just do not know the answer of that right now. As for today, what we learned thus far in early signing days, Ole Miss may have signed the best wide receiver class in the country. Don't give me Oregon. Keon Young shut down one of the 5 stars going to Oregon, who had 2 catches for 6 yards in a game against the Lakeland Dreadnoughts last weekend. He might be a 5-star, but it seems like it might be an analytical 5-star. It's not a real 5-star. It's not a Caleb Cunningham, for instance, 5-star. Number 2, Pete Golding spent this year focusing on the linebacker position and also the safety position, and it looks like it worked, as this class is absolutely stacked. And third of all, Austin Simmons appears to have the personality to be a great recruiter. We always talk about Jackson Dart and his magnetic personality. It looks like Austin Simmons has a little bit of that too, and he was able to put together the wide receiver room and pass that first test of an early signing day before the bowl game and before the transfer portal. It is a nice proof of concept of what Ole Miss has with Austin Simmons. But this wide receiver room genuinely has a chance to be special. It genuinely has the chance to be the top wide receiver room that Ole Miss has ever signed. The talent is all there. You have the anchor wide receiver in 5-star Caleb Cunningham, the best wide receiver to come out of Mississippi, potentially since AJ and maybe even over AJ. Caleb has all kinds of talent right now. It's just oozing from him. His athletic ability, his height, his fluidity, his hands, the whole 9 yards. He can do it all. If anybody on Ole Miss's roster has a chance to have a Ryan Williams type impact on 2025, it's Caleb Cunningham. So Caleb Cunningham has to be the first thing that you talk about. He is an Under Armour All-American, 5-star. He's going to the Mississippi-Alabama game as well. But when you look at Caleb Cunningham in that Under Armour All-American game, I'm going to pay attention to how he plays in one-on-ones against that competition. That's the best of the best. Whenever you show out at that Under Armour game, you know that player is going to be good. It doesn't necessarily matter the game, but I want to see the practice reps, the practice competing and all of that, and see exactly how Caleb is able to do. Caleb has a chance to be really special when he gets to Ole Miss as a wide receiver, as a threat downfield, the fluidity of movement in the hands. He has a chance to do it all, but it is going to be on Caleb to pick everything up as this goes as well. He's not the only thing that Ole Miss picked up in this early signing day, though. Ole Miss grabbed Dillon Alfred, a 4-star player out of Saraland High School in Alabama. He's originally from Gaucher. I think that's where Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles is as well. But you have a situation with Dillon. He's a very good player. Now, I think he might have got season, and he's going to take a little time to recover. He's probably a candidate to redshirt, depending on the serious of the injury, but he's a good player. He's a guy that Mike Espy consistently wanted to come on my show and talk about. Mike Espy's a big fan of the Alfred family, and he should be, because when you look at this guy play, the fluidity of it, he looks a lot like Mike Espy playing wide receiver. He looks a little bit like Shea Hodge. He might be a little bit bigger than Mike. So we're going to say Shea Hodge as well. But he has a chance to have a very physical impact on the outside of this Ole Miss offense, lining up as an outside wide receiver. Now, he can play inside. He can do that, but he doesn't necessarily have to. He has the body and the makeup to be able to handle the outside. And the reason he doesn't have to play out inside is because Ole Miss got a signature from Winston Watkins. He's a 4-star player. He has been a 5-star player on Rivals.com. He's from Venice High School in Florida. I think that is in Fort Myers. He is the prototypical slot type wide receiver. He is a really, really good player. Basically, he is Elijah Moore. And when you look at that, you're like, okay, Steve, what you're saying he's Elijah? No, he is an unbelievably athletic guy. And if you cut on his huddle video, you can see him making plays that other players just can't make. And it's like, well, how did he do that? And you're trying to figure out and do the calculus in your mind of how this happened. So Winston Watkins playing in the slot as a prototypical slot wide receiver, bookended by Caleb Cunningham and Dillon Alfred, you can actually see how that would work. Now, Ole Miss has Aiden Williams. Aiden Williams is a good wide receiver and has shown out in camp. He's still around. They have Nareel White that has all the ability in the world. And you can see why I talk about this offensive unit having a chance to be more explosive than it was, even though it's going to be a lot younger than it was. I mean, when the elder statesman of this team going in there, the wide receiver room, is going to be juniors Aiden Williams and junior Caden Lee, that tells you how young this group is. And when you look at the running back room, potentially with a Shakai Mills-Knight and potentially with a Guillory, should him in a couple hours decide to go that direction. But you can see how the offense could be very young, yet very explosive. So you might be some growing pains as well. I do trust Austin Simmons with everything to handle this, because the maturity beyond his years is evident. We're going to talk about him in the bowl game and that in the third segment. And there's also an interesting rumor that I just heard today about the bowl game that might change the calculus just a little bit if it actually comes to fruition. It is just a rumor, but I am going to share that with everybody as well. This wide receiver group potentially is in the conversation for the best, most elite unit in all of recruiting in the country this year. Oregon is going to be up there, obviously, just because of these stars, because they signed 2 5-stars. But like I said, one of those 5 stars in a game against an Ole Miss defensive back had 2 catches for 6 yards in a playoff game for the state championship game to be played in. So it's not a situation to where I'm just saying, okay, yeah, he is absolutely a 5-star and superior to the 4 stars on Ole Miss's team. That's not what I'm going to do. Dillon Alfred, really great receiver. Winston Watkins, really great prototypical slot type wide receiver. And Samari Lee. He is somebody who's a bigger wide receiver, has a chance to be on the outside, but he's a guy that, honestly, you're trying to think of comps, and I love playing comps, and I love being hyperbolic with my comps. But you're just looking at it as like coming out of nowhere. You have these big name wide receivers. You have this athletic guy that could be a wide receiver and can do a lot of different stuff. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. Is it a Marcus Colston? Is it a Deebo Samuel? I'm not talking about talent-wise. I'm talking about usage-wise. That's what Ole Miss is going to have potentially with Samari at wide receiver. Should be really, really interesting stuff for Ole Miss. Anyway, this is shaping up to be the year of the linebacker for Ole Miss. Pete Golding has flipped Tyler Lockhart from Mississippi State. He's landed Jarcoby Hopson. He has signed Bryson Walters. And this linebacker room appears to be loaded for years to come with elite talent across the board from defensive line to safety. This Rebels defense is stacked for the future. Stay tuned. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Currently, the SEC championship game is like teetering on a knife's edge. And you think about it, it's like, I think a switch flipped against Georgia Tech. And I think Georgia's going to roll a little bit in this game. So if you have a hunch like that in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the latest play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you visit FanDuel.com, join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So this is interesting because we did a video yesterday on potential flips, and we led with Tyler Lockhart. And Ole Miss did end up securing that flip from Mississippi State for Tyler Lockhart, and that led Ole Miss's wide receiver group into an excellent realm. Jarcoby, Hopson, and Tyler Lockhart is probably the best linebacker tandem in the state. And them playing together is going to be very reminiscent of what Chris Paul and TJ Doddering looked like and how they played the game. They're super athletic guys, all of them. They can go sideline to sideline. They also like physicality, and they like laying the wood. And when you add Bryson Walters to the scenario, he is recovering from an ACL surgery right now, so it's going to take a little time. He's another guy that is likely a redshirt candidate in 2025. But in the future, he could somebody that I could see being an absolute tackling machine, just like he was in high school. And when you look at these players overall, with Jarcoby Hopson, Lake Cormorant High School, Dandy Dozen, a 4-star player, super athletic guy. Now, credit to Lake Cormorant, they've kind of become the South Panola of modern times. Seemingly Ole Miss going to Lake Cormorant every single year in a pipeline that is developed in that school. That is a pretty cool thing. And then you've got state country in Winona, Mississippi. There's a picture of Tyler Lockhart after he announced for Ole Miss, standing in between two people wearing Mississippi State clothing at his announcement ceremony. It was a big pull to get Tyler Lockhart. This was a major Mississippi State area, and Pete Golding was able to flip that player over, even though his brother and best friend, I think, are on the team at Mississippi State. Tyler Lockhart's going to be a good player. He's former Auburn commit as well. He flipped from Auburn to Mississippi State, and now he's at Ole Miss. He's somebody athletic enough. He's just an athletic freak at the linebacker position and able to go sideline to sideline. Now, both Lockhart and Hopson needs to put on a little bit of weight to be ready to play. I think they're going to play special teams. I think they're going to play their first year, but it's going to be imperative on Ole Miss to put weight on both of these athletes. They're good players, and Walters, Walters, he just needs to recover from the surgery. Now, if you look at the other players on the middle of the defense, it wasn't just the linebackers. It was the spine of the defense where Pete Golding did work. And another player in the Mississippi State area, honestly, Cortez Thomas. He's a 4-star player out of Holmes County, Central Mississippi, another Dandy Dozen player. He's a safety. He is going to play in the Under Armour All-American game as well, so I'll be able to talk to him and see him there. But he is somebody that traditionally the pipeline has been that high school to Mississippi State. And everybody assumed that Cortez Thomas was going to follow that route as well. Cortez Thomas was able to not do that, essentially, and he ended up going to Ole Miss, and there was relatively no drama in this recruitment for Cortez Thomas. In what should have been an in-state battle to where so much drama was going on, there was not much drama in this recruitment, and it was crazy. Now, when you change to other parts of the safeties, you got the Florida guys, and the Florida guys are worth knowing. We're going to start with MJ Preston, Major Preston. He's a top 100 safety. He played at IMG Academy. If you play at IMG Academy, you're a good football player. It's basically like professional football 8 years early. He's originally from Virginia. He is a guy that has a little bit of Mike Hilton in his game, a little bit undersized, but he has a relentless motor and an eye for the football, and he genuinely makes plays for his team. And then you have Keon Young. Keon Young's a 4-star player with the Lakeland Dreadnoughts. That is the best name in all of sports. He's a top 35 safety nationally. But Lakeland did things a little bit different this year. And they went up against Tampa Bay Tech and their big, huge 5-star wide receiver in a game for the state championship game. They put Keon Young on that 5-star wide receiver, and Keon held that man to 2 catches for 6 yards, 3 yards per pop, no touchdowns. Lakeland is a very good program and generally has one of the top high school programs in all of Florida, but you don't see them shut down a 5-star receiver. I think it's worth noting that he was able to do that in such a big moment, because I think the moment matters as well as all of that. You can see how Pete Golding is putting together this defense. And when you look, like with Andrew Maddox being added to the defensive line room as well, and as much depth as they've recruited along that front. And of course, the transfer portal is just about to open up. I mean, that's just about to happen. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. But when you look at the safeties and the linebackers, there's a spine that is developed, and they're going to use the transfer portal likely to find themselves a cornerback, because they're going to have to find a replacement for Trey Amos. You're going to have Chris Graves back. You're going to have likely Isaiah Hamilton back, I think. Cedric Beavers is going to be back around as well. They have bodies, so don't worry about that. And a lot of people that played a lot of football, but Trey Amos was an elite shutdown cornerback that basically nobody heard his name for the last 5 weeks of the season. That's how good Trey was. Ole Miss has to find an elite shutdown guy. Ole Miss has to find an elite rush in to go with Suntaran Perkins, DJ Holmes, those guys. Cam Franklin is likely going to step into the Jared Ivey role. Whenever you look at transfer portal on the defensive line, the rumor is Jaheim Otis potentially coming to Ole Miss. He would be the Walter Nolan to go right next to with Xavion Harris at the other side. There is a lot of depth on this defensive line when you look at William Eccles and Jam Brown falling in right behind that group. There's a lot of people that can play football for Ole Miss, and Pete Golding is doing a heck of a job, honestly, in the high school market of building his team and building his roster. He has done the high school market as well as Lane Kiffin has done the transfer portal. And this isn't slamming either way, because Ole Miss needs 50 players this year. Ole Miss is going to sign a whole bunch of players in the transfer portal this year to go with a whole bunch of players in the high school market because they have to. They need those bodies. So if Ole Miss can handle everything that's going on, we talked about the wide receiver group in the first segment, and Austin Simmons basically putting that together with the help of the coaching staff and all of that, making that happen. In the second segment, we talked about how this defense is being rebuilt. You know, in the next segment, we're going to talk about Austin Simmons and how this is basically him passing his first test as QB1. And we'll also talk a little bit about the bowl game. Anyway, stick around for that. All right. Austin Simmons, in the early signing period, he showed and displayed that magnetic personality that you want from a QB1. You need a QB1 that people are drawn to. You need a QB1 that is the guy that is the circle in every room. Everybody circles around him no matter what room he's in. If your quarterback has a magnetic personality, the rest of your team is going to be able to be managed easier. You're not going to have the problems. You're not going to have leadership vacuums. It is easy whenever the quarterback becomes the leader of the football team. And everybody saw last season how it went. Before the season, Jackson Dart put out this is the last dance thing. And everybody was worried. It's like, okay, this was 1 year or it. And like, what do we have behind it? Because nobody had seen Austin Simmons play a game other than touch football in April. Then he played okay at the beginning of the season. Nothing great, just okay. And then in the Georgia game, Jackson Dart went down with an injury. Georgia was up 7-0. And Austin Simmons proceeded to drive his team down the field to score the game-tying touchdown in a way that basically re-energized Ole Miss and re-energized that stadium and all of the recruits that were in that stadium. That was your on-the-field proof of concept with Austin Simmons. That is when recruits said, okay, everybody told me that when Jackson Dart leaves, they don't have anything and they're going to go into the portal again and all of that. They told me that, but that's not true. There's this guy there. And the next question was, what type of a leader was Austin Simmons? What type of personality did Austin Simmons have? And I think the first evidence towards personality was this early signing day and this class that he brought in. I mean, looking at Shakai Mills-Knight, by the end, was the staff's number one running back on the board. And that's including A.K. Deer. He is somebody that has developed into a massive, just the staff loves him. Shakai Mills-Knight's 220 pounds. He can run like a deer. He is built like, honestly, Quinshawn was when Quinshawn got to Ole Miss. He has a chance. He's a 3-time MVP of his team. He's a top 100 player on Rivals, and he's originally from Canada. He's Canadian. But he's a guy that, having a guy like Austin Simmons, you get him to protect Austin Simmons. Shakai Mills-Knight was brought in as protection for Austin Simmons because the staff knew that what they had. The other way that you protected Austin Simmons is by getting offensive linemen. And Ole Miss hasn't signed a high-level offensive lineman in 10 years. They've signed a bunch of dudes and a bunch of guys, and a lot of them have performed relatively well and made it to the next level. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about just this guy's rated more than anything else. Devin Harper is a top 100 offensive lineman. He is going to go to Ole Miss. He is going to protect Austin Simmons. And I do think that it's going to be important for Ole Miss this year to make the right tackle the position of need in the transfer portal as opposed to the left tackle. Everything has been about the left tackle, but nobody can assume that Diego Pounds or Jaden Williams can play right tackle. You need to find somebody that you can count on to be on the right-handed side, because nothing can make this offense look worse than not protecting the quarterback's blind side. I have all the faith in Austin Simmons and what he can do. And his leadership that he showed in the early signing day was absolutely fantastic to see. You've seen proof of concept on the field. You've seen a little bit of proof of concept off the field. And the next step for him will be is if he is starting the bowl game or playing a good bit in the bowl game. We'll talk about that in just a second. He needs to go out there and put another and stamp his authority on this job. Again, Austin needs to just act like he's QB1. He needs to basically assume, and it doesn't need to be given to him. He just needs to take it. And if he's starting in the bowl game, he needs to go out and perform pretty well. He needs to go out and perform in a way that it was if Jackson Dart never left. If Austin Simmons can do that, the momentum can continue on to the 2026 class, and Ole Miss will make inroads with recruits that way. Which that leads me to the rumor that I heard today. And again, it's a rumor. I have no idea if there's any veracity to it or not, but I heard it from a very good source and somebody that I trust when they say it. So take all of this with a grain of salt, but keep your eyes open for it. And the rumor is right now that Jackson Dart is leaning towards playing in the bowl game. And the rumor is he's like 320 yards away from Chad Kelly's single season record, something like that. He could do that and own absolutely every record that Ole Miss has. So the rumor is that he was thinking about playing in the game. And I would be all for him getting the record and playing well and all of that stuff too, as long as Austin is okay with it. If Austin's not okay with it, with what's coming up in the transfer portals and all of that, I do not know that I would be okay with it. But if Austin's okay with it, I'm okay with it. Ole Miss needs to try and figure out a way to get Austin some series in the game, though. Even if Jackson plays in the game, you need to find a way to get Austin a couple of series in the game. Because the bowl game is basically replaced the spring game for colleges and universities, and especially Ole Miss, who might have a dunk contest again for all we know. So I do think if Jackson plays in the bowl game, there needs to be a series or two that's for Austin Simmons, period. And you can see what you have. Just have a couple of series where Austin and Aiden and Caden Lee, all underclassmen, are on the field, so you see what you have. If you can do that, I'm perfectly fine with it. The other rumor that I heard, again, just rumors, but you might be interested in it, is Ole Miss versus Colorado potentially in the Las Vegas Bowl. And that would be interesting, especially with Deion saying nobody was going to opt out. I don't know if he means Shedeur or not, but he said nobody is going to opt out of the game because that's not their program. Lane Kiffin and Deion Sanders game would break the internet. I mean, I can see that. Las Vegas Bowl would make a ton of money because not necessarily because Ole Miss people traveling to it or Colorado people traveling to it. People are just going to want to see that spectacle of Deion Sanders versus Lane Kiffin. But that is the interesting rumor. The other thing that I heard about bowl games today was from Brad Crawford, our old South Carolina friend. People remember him campaigning for the playoff before Tuesday. He said he heard that either Ole Miss or South Carolina are going to end up in the Citrus Bowl. The Citrus Bowl is going to have their choice of those two teams. And the loser, the one that doesn't get selected, is going to play in the Gator Bowl. So it's a Jacksonville game. And that would be funny because, well, not necessarily funny, because I compared this Ole Miss team pretty favorably to that 1990 Michigan team that Ole Miss played the last time that they were in the Gator Bowl. So we'll see exactly how that goes and what happens. Again, opt-outs and the whole 9 yards. I'm expecting some stuff to pop over the next couple of weeks. We saw with Juice Wells going into the East-West Shrine game. I'm assuming he's opting out. I do not know. But whenever he put that out there, that's at least something. But at this point, a bowl game for me, and I think a bowl game entirely for the Ole Miss fan base, is the first game of 2025, not the last game of 2024. And I think it needs to be treated like that a little bit. Again, if Jackson wants to come back, that is absolutely fantastic. I hope he breaks all the record, Ole Miss wins, and he goes out completely on top. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as a mindset in this game, Lane Kiffin needs to not rely on some of the older players and give the younger guys a shot to know exactly what he has before they get into spring and before they get into fall. So get a head start on that in bowl practices and beyond. If you can do that, you'll probably be better off at the beginning of 2025 in what should be a relatively manageable schedule. Florida is going to be a little bit better. Oklahoma is probably going to be a little bit better. But it's a situation where Ole Miss is going to be favored more times than they're not. So we'll see exactly how it goes. So thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen and go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves in offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there, and the Ole Miss Morning Show. That your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description for the Insiders program. You can join that. It was a 14-day free trial. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.